Hello everyone and welcome back to the 49ers Golden Ticket. My name is Gabriel and today we are going to recap that Week 5 victory over the Carolina Panthers, which then got their head coach fired. We'll take a look at Jimmy Garoppolo and his potential improvement, or is it Kyle Shanahan's, or do they finally have a relationship we can talk about? We're going to give John Lynch his flowers for building this roster because since 2017, we are the most injured team, and we got to get to the bottom of that too. Of course, we'll also take a look ahead to Week 6 against the Atlanta Falcons. Stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome to our quarterback play-by-playback. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the comments and the suggestions on ways to improve this segment. It's something that we threw together a couple of weeks ago to give you guys a better recap of the game. So we're always looking to improve the content we bring. So I do appreciate that. Unfortunately, I'm not so sure I was able to incorporate much of that stuff this time as I'm still learning on the fly. But either way, here's our recap of the 37-15 victory over the Carolina Panthers.
Garoppolo, short right to George Kittle for 5 yards. Keeping him involved early, Garoppolo, deep left to George Kittle for 20 yards. Jeff Wilson bursts up the middle, then to the sideline for a gain of 41 yards. Garoppolo, incomplete, short middle for Deebo Samuel. Garoppolo, short right to Tevin Coleman for a 9-yard touchdown. Garoppolo, short right to Juice for 9 yards. Garoppolo, incomplete, deep middle intended for Deebo. Garoppolo, short right to George Kittle for 10 yards. Garoppolo, short right to Kittle for 7 yards. Kittle fumbles and loses the ball. Turnover. Garoppolo, under heavy pressure, deep left to Tevin Coleman for 30 yards. Garoppolo, short right to Jeff Wilson for 12 yards. Garoppolo, short right to George Kittle for 16 yards down to the 1-yard line. Mike McGlinchey penalty negates the play. Garoppolo, incomplete, short left to George Kittle. Garoppolo, sacked for -6 yards. Jalen Moore got beat. Baker Mayfield, nowhere to go with the ball, sacked for -1 yards by Hufanga. Garoppolo, intermediate over the middle to Brandon Ayuk for 24 yards. Garoppolo, play action, incomplete, short right for Deebo Samuel. Garoppolo, short left to Coleman for 5 yards. Garoppolo, with pressure, incomplete, deep left for Brandon Ayuk. Wishnowski punts another beauty inside the 10-yard line, and it gets downed at the Carolina 7. Coleman, outside zone right, bursts outside, then gets upfield for 14 yards. Garoppolo, incomplete, short middle to Deebo. Garoppolo, incomplete, short left to Deebo. Garoppolo, short right to George Kittle for 5 yards. Robbie Gould, field goal, blocked. Baker Mayfield, intended for Christian McCaffrey, tipped, intercepted by Emmanuel Mosley, and taken to the house in the other direction. Pick 6. Defense gives one up here. Christian McCaffrey touchdown after a 51-yard drive coming off the pick 6. 49ers defense holds them to a failed 2-point conversion. Garoppolo, still trying to show range. Incomplete, deep middle to the speedster Danny Gray. Garoppolo, short left to Deebo Samuel for 16 yards. Jeff Wilson bursts up the middle for 14 yards. Garoppolo, short middle to Juwan Jennings for 32 yards. Jennings, 30 yards after the catch, down to the 4-yard line. Garoppolo scrambles up the middle for a 4-yard touchdown. Penalty on Aaron Banks, touchdown nullified. Garoppolo, incomplete, short left to Deebo Samuel. Garoppolo, short right to Deebo Samuel for 4 yards. Touchdown. Robbie Gould kicks off after the touchdown and field goal. He proceeds to make the tackle on this play, getting injured. Why was he making the tackle, special teams? Charvarius Ward breaks up a pass in the end zone that would have been a touchdown. Baker Mayfield sacked by Charles Omenihu and Samson Ebukam. Carolina settles for a field goal. Garoppolo sacked for -3 yards. Mike McGlinchey was beat. Garoppolo, short right to Juice for 18 yards, 22 yards after the catch. Garoppolo, incomplete, short middle to Deebo. Garoppolo, short middle to Brandon Ayuk for 18 yards. Garoppolo, incomplete, ball tipped. Garoppolo, incomplete, short left to Jeff Wilson. Garoppolo, short left to Juwan Jennings for 13 yards. Jeff Wilson up the middle for 16 yards to the 1-yard line. Jeff Wilson to the right for a 1-yard touchdown. Garoppolo, short middle to Ayuk for the 2-point conversion. Penalty on Banks, 2-point conversion nullified. Wishnowsky forced to attempt the extra point, misses wide left. Baker Mayfield sacked for -6 yards by Charles Omenihu and Kerry Hyder. Jeff Wilson rushes to the edge, bursts upfield for 23 yards. Coleman to the right end for 15 yards. Penalty on Warner, first down called back. Garoppolo, play action, short left to Brandon Ayuk for 16 yards. Wishnowsky punts another beauty and once again pins them at their own 10-yard line. Emmanuel Mosley breaks up a deep pass intended for DJ Moore. On the play, E-Man tears his ACL. He's out for the year. Baker Mayfield sacked for -7 yards by Drake Jackson. Turnover on downs. Garoppolo tripped on the handoff to Coleman. He runs outside left for a 5-yard touchdown. The Wishnowsky extra point is good. Backup quarterback P.J. Walker sacked for -5 yards by Tayshaun Gibson and Oren Burks. P.J. Walker sacked for -10 yards by Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. Brock Purdy and the 49ers kneel for the win.
And there you have it, a 37-15 victory over the Carolina Panthers. Now, unfortunately for the Panthers, after the game, they did fire their head coach. He was only 2 years and 5 days into his 7-year, $40 million guaranteed contract. So the Panthers will still be on the hook for that money. Now, this is also something I talked about last week as being a potential landing spot for DeMeco Ryans, but I had assumed that the Panthers would keep Matt Rule until the end of the year. But still, it happened after the 49ers game. There's a head coaching vacancy with a good team, a good roster, and DeMeco Ryans is a good leader. He might be the man for that job. Matt Rule was responsible for multiple turnovers in college, turning bad teams into championship teams. Unfortunately, it didn't translate in the NFL for him, but that's still a good roster over there in Carolina. And so DeMeco Ryans, go get it. Are we finally starting to see the growth of Jimmy Garoppolo, or at least his comfortability with Kyle Shanahan? He did mention before the game last week that this is the most comfortable that he and Kyle Shanahan have ever been together, and it can't help but wonder what sparked that. And I did hear an interview from Rob Stats Guerrera, who used to work for ESPN, and when he decided to leave ESPN, he mentioned that they approached him and asked him what it was that they could do for him to keep him. And so maybe the 49ers did something similar with Garoppolo, and that allowed him to open up and speak more freely, which isn't quite the way that Jimmy Garoppolo has been in the past, possibly coming from New England, who's very much an organization that is just shut up and do your job. And so we see some of that with Jimmy, especially in press conferences. He is very much, he says a lot without saying anything. And New England is very good at doing that. Bill Belichick is very good at doing that. And so Garoppolo, I believe, inherently was very good at doing that. And so maybe he was never open with Kyle before. But once they had that exit interview, you could call it, maybe that allowed him to speak his mind more freely. Right now, Jimmy boasts his career best 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's never done that in his career, nor has he gone 3 games without throwing an interception. And right now he's at 2 games without one. So let's see what he can do next week. The improvements are very clear though. He is throwing outside the numbers, and that could be a mix of him and Kyle Shanahan because he's rolling out and he's attacking other parts of the field than just the middle, which is beautiful to see. Jimmy is great at attacking the middle of the field. It's what he's done for a long time. But now that he's attacking other parts of the field, defenses are going to have to start defending more areas of the field, which will open up throws everywhere. Right now, the throws over the middle are very clogged, and Jimmy is still nailing them, and he has last year as well, and in years past. But defenses are clued in on it. So the more he can do, the more that will open up. And Kyle Shanahan, I think, is starting to realize that as well, and he's taking a little bit of his leash off of Jimmy, especially considering they have to depend so much on Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy could have said no. He could have refused the pay cut, but he was a good soldier. He decided he was going to be a backup, and now this is his show. And this is his last chance, potentially, to show everyone, hey, I am a top starting quarterback in this league. We got to talk about Jimmy's toughness. He mentioned also before the game in an interview with The Athletic, I believe, about how he didn't want to come. This was during the offseason while Trey Lance was still healthy, of course, that he didn't want to show up to training camp and that he didn't want to come to meetings and he was still rehabbing from his shoulder and that his shoulder wasn't going to be 100% this year. Well, the 49ers forced him to come to training camps, and I assume it's because they didn't want to fine him because it's part of the NFLPA now that the team has to fine the players for not showing up to camp, and they used to be able to reimburse the player for those fines, but that's no longer the case. They banned that, and so the fines are fine. Jimmy Garoppolo might be bringing some stability to this offense as well. Obviously, that first game against Denver, he was very rusty. It was like watching a preseason game, maybe even worse. The next game he improved, and then the next game he improved. So Garoppolo has consistently improved 3 weeks in a row now, which is nice to see. Along with his improvement, we're seeing improvement from the offensive line, regardless of the injuries that they've incurred. Daniel Brunskill returning to the offensive line as well has brought some continuity, and I do see them dialing it up better along the offensive line, but we are still watching a lot of bad football there, and it needs to improve. But Jimmy's doing his part. He's getting the ball out quickly. So far, he seems to be making good decisions, although I have seen a couple of interceptions get dropped. Let's hope he can clean those up and continue to make better decisions. Speaking of Jimmy's toughness, it's really unfortunate to see some of the extra hits he's taking that maybe other quarterbacks are not taking. We saw that flag thrown for Tom Brady when Grady Jarrett threw him to the ground. It was just a normal sack, but it was a little bit reminiscent of the one that got Tua injured, but a flag wasn't thrown for Tua, so it shouldn't have been thrown for Brady. These are big time hits. He's getting up slow. He clearly looks hurt. The guy's tough though. He's staying out there, and it's interesting that he is being this tough, and he was this tough at the end of the year last year with the shoulder, the hand. But the interviews in years past with Martellus Bennett saying some kind of awful things about Jimmy Garoppolo, he seems to be proving those things wrong. Maybe he's heard it and took the criticism to heart and decided to show everybody wrong. John Lynch has been putting this amazing roster together since 2017, but we are still the most injured team in the NFL, and that dates all the way back to 2017. Let me just go over a couple of the injuries and the years with you guys. Back in 2017, we sent 24 players to IR. Some of those notable players would be Trent Brown, Jimmy Ward, Jaquiski Tartt, Pierre Garcon, Super Bowl MVP Malcolm Smith, Josh Garnett, Raheem Mostert, Ronald Blair, Tank Carradine, Joe Williams. That's a lot. In 2018, we sent 18 people to IR. Names including Jimmy Garoppolo, Adrian Colbert, Raheem Mostert again, Emmanuel Mosley, Jimmy Ward, Dakota Watson, Pierre Garcon, Akella Witherspoon, Jaquasi Tart, Matt Breida, Dante Pettis. And then in 2019, we sent 17 people to IR. Names such as Quan Alexander, Ronald Blair, Garrett Selleck, Adrian Colbert, Jalen Hurd, DJ Jones, Jerick McKinnon, Weston Richburg, Kentavious Street, Trent Taylor, and Jason Verrett. In 2020, we sent 34 players to IR. Mind you, that was the COVID year and the first year with a really funky offseason, which I do think is attributed to a lot of these injuries. But those injuries in 2020 include names such as Ziggy Ansah, Tavon Austin, Travis Benjamin, Ronald Blair, Nick Bosa, Jake Brindell, Tevin Coleman, Dee Ford, Ben Garland, Jimmy Garoppolo, JaMychal Hasty, Jalen Hurd, Richie James, George Kittle, Raheem Mostert, Nick Mullins, Weston Richburg, Deebo Samuel, Richard Sherman, Jaquaski Tartt, Solomon Thomas, Trent Williams, Jeff Wilson, and K'Wan Williams. In 2021, we sent 25 people to IR. Names include Dee Ford, Devin Funchess, Kevin Givens, Robbie Gould, Dre Greenlaw, JaMychal Hasty, Maurice Hurst, Richie James, Javon Kinlaw, George Kittle, Mike McGlinchey, Emmanuel Mosley, Raheem Mostert, Mohamed Sanu, Trey Sermon, Jaquaski Tartt, Jason Verrett. And then this year, we've already sent a few people to IR. Names such as Elijah Mitchell, Maurice Hurst, Jordan Matthews, Trey Lance, Jordan Willis, Azeez Al-Shaair, Colton McKivitz, Curtis Robinson, and now Emmanuel Mosley. But also injured this year has been Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Tyrion Davis-Price, George Kittle, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, and Robbie Gould. These are big-time players, big-time starters for our team that John Lynch has handpicked, has traded for, or has signed in free agency. These are difference makers for our team, and right now we are playing without them. Even though we are playing without them, John Lynch still has this team humming. It is a deep roster. Nick Bosa with that groin injury is a huge loss, and the Niners do have some players who can fill in, though. Charles Omenihu is playing the Arden Key role very well, and so is Kerry Hyder. Those two guys have unstoppable motors, I would say. They just go and they go and they go and they don't get tired, or if they are tired, they push through it. And they are really, really high-level players, and they are getting the most out of this defensive line right now. Chris Kosarick is doing an amazing job. Drake Jackson is growing into his own, and Samson Ebukam is starting to turn into a heck of a player. Over on the outside corner, opposite of superstar Charvarius Ward, I expect to see a lot of the rookie out of Toledo, Samuel Womack, or maybe even the old trusty Dante Johnson, who always finds his way back to the 49ers, or potentially a healthy, we hope, Jason Verrett coming back, but I don't anticipate Verrett back for a couple of weeks. So it might be Ambry Thomas, who finished the year last year for us and played well, but has not looked good this year in preseason or in his limited playing time. But he was in the game last week when E-Man went out. So maybe it will be Ambry Thomas, but I fully expect it to be Samuel Womack. He's just somebody who's had a better offseason and is playing at a higher level right now. And maybe the reason John Lynch knows how to put together such a great roster, or maybe get the best from his players, is because he was a player himself. So he knows some of the traits maybe to look for that are inside people that they haven't even discovered in themselves yet. Guys like Fred Warner, that might have been the case. He is an absolute star, and he was a third-round pick. Guys like George Kittle, fifth-round pick. Dre Greenlaw, fifth-round pick. Samuel Womack, fifth-round pick. We are getting the best from some really, really special players that fell in drafts, and maybe it's because John Lynch seen something that they didn't see in themselves or other teams didn't see in them, and he knows how to get it out of them. And that's why we have such a deep roster. Even though we are the most injured team since 2017, and we went over some of those names, those are all huge names throughout the years, and we still made it to a Super Bowl. We still made it to an NFC championship. And this year, we look bound for the Super Bowl or NFC Championship again. We have the #1 defense, and we can't talk about this defense without talking about the linebackers. My goodness, Fred Warner is still all-pro Fred, but Dre Greenlaw is playing way above his weight right now. He is looking better than Fred Warner at times, which is scary because Fred Warner is all-pro Fred, the highest paid linebacker in the NFL. So if Greenlaw is playing up to that level, then that's amazing. And that's just a credit to these coaches. D'Amico Ryans, after him it was Johnny Holland right now. Before D'Amico, it was Robert Saleh. All of those guys who were linebackers in college and in the NFL and became coaches and then defensive coordinators. And next year, D'Amico is going to be a head coach. So maybe Johnny Holland gets that defensive coordinator job if he continues to impress the way that he has. These linebackers are absolutely flying. Even guys like Azeez Al-Shaair, when he was healthy, you could say that he had some games that were better than Fred Warner. But Fred Warner is the standard. And if you're better than that, that's amazing because that's an all-pro standard. So when you have the opportunity to reach heights greater than Warner, even if not on a consistent basis, it's very impressive, and it creates for a very dangerous linebacking core that can kill you all over the field. I mean, they're stuffing the run game, they're breaking up passes, they're locking down tight ends. I mean, this linebacking core is really, really impressive right now. Now, the plan without Trent Williams, obviously Colton McKivitz as well. Jalen Moore was thrust into action, and he looks like he's getting better. He's struggling, but maybe not as much as McGlinchey. McGlinchey really had a bad game this week. I look for him to improve. He's still recovering from his injury last year, which is his hamstring, I believe. He tore it right off the bone. So hopefully McGlinchey will continue to improve because last week's showing was not good. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get hurt if that continues. With Jimmy continuing to stabilize the offense, along with that came some of the run game. It's definitely improved. And Jimmy's, I think, a big reason why, because he's helping call some of the protections. The return of Daniel Brunskill to the starting lineup, as I mentioned earlier, I think is a reason why as well. This offensive line is starting to run block well, which is going to create mismatches in the passing game and open more things up for Jimmy Garoppolo. So, hey, man, I hope he has his best year yet and takes us to a Super Bowl. Let's see it happen. Now looking ahead to the Atlanta Falcons in Week 6, this is what people are calling a trap game. However, I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be closer to what we saw with the Carolina Panthers. The Atlanta Falcons are a decent team with decent pieces. Marcus Mariota isn't the worst quarterback, just like Baker Mayfield wasn't. There are weapons there on the offense. I think Drake London is a big-time receiver. Kyle Pitts is a big-time tight end. But unfortunately, on defense, they're atrocious. Their only name, no, they got two. They got Grady Jarrett. I forgot about him. But A.J. Terrell is the only other namesake in their defense, and their defense has given up a ton of points this year. I expect the Niners to have their way, whichever way they want it to be in this game. If they want to run the ball 40 times, they might as well do that. If they want to pass the ball 40 times, they might as well do that. This team, the Atlanta Falcons, won't be able to stop anything, and I expect another score similar to what we saw with Carolina. So my prediction is going to be 37-18. It's a very strange score prediction, but that's what we got. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap it up for us here at the Golden Ticket. I appreciate all of your time today. I hope you learned some stuff. I had a lot of fun talking to you guys. But if you ever have any questions or comments, or hey, maybe you want to come on the show and discuss some stuff sometime, please don't hesitate to reach out. Leave a comment in the comments section or hit us up over at 49ersGT on Twitter. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Good luck, Niners.